Hello everyone, welcome back for another edition of Our Sky Tonight. My name is Seth Mayo, I'm the curator of astronomy for the LOHMAN Planetarium. Thanks for tuning in again as we cover the celestial realm above us for the week of October 26th through November 1st. And in this episode, we're going to say farewell to the summer constellation Scorpius. We're going to look at Mars again and how our bright moon will slide past it very soon. We'll take a look at a couple well-positioned deep sky objects for the fall in the northeast, and celebrate the coincidence of our blue moon happening on Halloween. So let's take a look. Now at this time of the year, if you're looking towards the southwest, we can say farewell to the very prominent summer constellation known as Scorpius, the Scorpion. And right now it looks like an S turned on its side. And if you've been following many of the episodes in the past, we've talked all about this constellation and how it's prominently in the south. Scorpius is a very old constellation, and if you remember from the past episodes, we had talked about the galactic center near the Stinger, the center of our galaxy, Sagittarius right here, the Centaur, and not too far behind Jupiter and Saturn, more towards the south. And you won't see Scorpius again until the early morning of January of next year, of 2021. So for a little bit of time, Scorpius will be obscured by the sun until it re-emerges in the southeastern morning sky, right around sunrise. One thing I want to continue to emphasize is the brightness of Mars. And if we're looking towards the east after sunset, and you notice what looks like a very bright, kind of orangish, reddish star that doesn't twinkle, you're most likely looking at the red planet Mars here, which has been great. Our closest approach to Mars was on October 6th. Opposition when Mars was opposite of the sun was on October 13th. And for this whole month of October, it has been very, very bright. It is starting to diminish in brightness, but will still be great for the rest of the year since we're still in the proximity of this planet due to the way the orbits of Earth and Mars sort of are kind of coinciding. So this is a great time still to look at the red planet, maybe look at it with a telescope or even binoculars as well as it rises earlier and earlier in the east. And what is great is that the moon will join the planet. And so this is on Monday when the moon is a little farther away from Mars. The moon will still be a waxing gibbous, as you see here, more than half full. And as we continue through the week, getting into Tuesday, Wednesday, but by Thursday the 29th, the moon will be very close to Mars, so it'll be a very large, almost full moon, and still a fairly bright Mars as well. And so it's nice when two very bright solar system objects get this close, especially when Mars is this bright in our sky. So this is a nice pairing coming up. What I love about this time of the year is that there's some really awesome deep sky objects that are getting really high up in the sky, and in particular in the northeast. And one of the first ones I want to mention is something near a very bright constellation that many people recognize or at least notice in the sky. And if you're looking in the northeast, after sunset, I have the time right now set to 9 o'clock when this is pretty high up. You may find what looks like a letter W right here on its side, or a letter M, depending on how you turn your head. That is Cassiopeia. She is the queen from Greek mythology, queen of Ethiopia from those stories. And this is supposed to be a queen sitting on her throne. And not far from Cassiopeia, the W shape, are a group of stars that kind of make kind of like a gentle curve in this area. And so you may notice them. They're fairly bright, and these stars, along with a few others, make up the constellation called Andromeda. Andromeda is the daughter of Cassiopeia. She's Princess Andromeda. So when I look for her, I see those stars that kind of make this gentle curve. That's supposed to be her body. And then you may see a few stars kind of jutting out sort of towards Cassiopeia slightly. And sometimes I like to think of that as Andromeda's arm, or it's part of her body, either way. And if you look carefully, you'll notice a little blob of light right here, okay? And this is something you'll need to see in a darker location, or with binoculars or a telescope. but it is possible to see with your naked eyes. Again, you'll see that kind of blob of light. And what that is the farthest object that you can see without an optical aid, the farthest thing you can see with your naked eyes, and that's something called the Andromeda Galaxy. It is a very, very famous galaxy. I'm sure many of you have heard of it before and know a little bit about it. It is named after the constellation it sits inside of. It sits inside of Andromeda, the princess, the daughter of Cassiopeia. And so there it is. And this galaxy is still very far away. It's 2.5 million light years away. That means the light takes approximately 2.5 million years to travel from that galaxy to reach your eyes here on Earth. So the light you're seeing from it is 2.5 million year old photons. And fun fact, light does not really experience time like we do. So for light, it was an instant travel from Andromeda to us. But for us, that took 2.5 million years, a ridiculous distance. But compared to other galaxies in the universe, one of the closer ones to us, and actually the closest large galaxy in our local group of galaxies. And our own galaxy, the Milky Way, is about 100,000 light years across, a little bit more. Andromeda is about twice the size. It is a massive spiral galaxy, which we can zoom into it right here to see it. And in this image, you can also see a couple satellite galaxies here too. So this is M32, this is M110, part of the Messier catalog. Andromeda is also called M31, is another name you'll see on different catalogs. That means Messier 31, but we know it as the Andromeda Galaxy. And here's another picture taken by an astronomer who took a telescope and with a camera attached, and has a really, really spectacular view with long exposure times of this galaxy. Not surprisingly, one of the best views we have of this neighboring galaxy of ours, Andromeda, is from the Hubble Space Telescope. And this picture came out some years ago of the highest resolution picture of Andromeda. It's only part of the entire galaxy. And this image is massive. It's 1.5 billion pixels wide. And to display the entire image, you would need 600 HD TV screens next to each other to show this in its real resolution, which is unbelievable. So this is actually on the Space Telescope website, spacetoLescope.org. Is a website you can go on that supplies the pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope. And you can go on and actually zoom around in this image. And I can show it to you here real quickly. This is the galactic center. Of course, in the very center, there'll be a supermassive black hole, just like our own Milky Way galaxy has. And as we zoom in, you'll just see the kind of resolution I'm talking about. You can see the gaseous arms, because this is a spiral galaxy like ours, kind of a flat disk of stars, and a massive galaxy at that. And as we zoom in, you'll see all this fuzz. That is not fuzz or noise. It looks like a noisy image. What it is those are stars. This is amazing. That's how high resolution this is. If we zoom in, all those dots are stars, which is unbelievable to really see that kind of detail. You can continue zooming in. Some of the stars you may see are foreground stars within our own galaxy. But the little ones you see here are within Andromeda. And that really shows you what can be seen with the Hubble Space Telescope. A gorgeous, gorgeous view that you can zoom in yourself on this Space Telescope website. And it's amazing. I could spend all day just looking at the different features, zooming in and seeing what the galaxy looks like up close. And it's quite amazing. So finding Andromeda in the sky is a real treat. But again, if you see it with your naked eyes, it will just look like a fuzzy little ball of light, and you got to be in a dark location to see it. That is why this time of year it's good to find it, because it's high enough above the horizon that can obscure objects that are very dim. And so when it's higher up, it gets a little clearer and a little easier to see. So if you find Cassiopeia, the W shape just south of it, you may see kind of a lineup of stars that slightly curve, and then off it a couple more stars, and maybe the Andromeda Galaxy. And some advice for looking at dim objects: this is going to sound a little funny, but don't look straight at it. Actually, what you need to do is something called averted vision, and that's when you use your peripheral vision. So you look kind of to the side of it and use a little bit of your peripheral to see it, because in your peripheral vision is where your night vision is located. The center part of your eye is your color vision that's used for daytime viewing, and so it makes it hard to see dim objects. But your peripheral vision that can be utilized during averted vision techniques can make it easier, not only for naked eye viewing, but if you take a telescope or binoculars and you look in this area, do the same thing. Kind of look to the side of it and allow your peripheral to take in the view of Andromeda. And another kind of fun thing to know about this galaxy is not only it's a neighboring galaxy of ours, kind of a really big neighbor, but it's on a collision course with us. In about 4.5 billion years, it will collide with our galaxy in this spectacular fashion and eventually become one large galaxy called an elliptical galaxy. That will take a very long time for that to happen. And interestingly, most stars will not collide during the collision. The space between stars is so great that either stars will be part of the new galaxy or be flung off into space. So it's fun to think about all of that when you're looking at that little blob of light of Andromeda, 2.5 million light years away. Another great deep sky object to look for at this time of year is actually not far from Cassiopeia and Andromeda. And if you look just below Cassiopeia, okay, the W shape in the northeast still, and this is still at about 9 o'clock, you may find a group of stars that, to me, look kind of like a backwards lowercase y shape. And let me show you what that looks like here. This is called Perseus. And Perseus the warrior, he's also involved with Andromeda. He saved Andromeda from being sacrificed to a big sea monster. So he's a very impressive, very famous warrior from Greek mythology. He's the one who slayed Medusa. And what's great about him is you can find a great binocular object. So something that's great to see through binoculars and not just really through a telescope. So if we look kind of near the head of, at least in this version of Perseus, near his head up here and pretty close to Cassiopeia, you may find, and this can also be visible with your naked eyes in a dark location, you can find two dense areas of stars. We call these star clusters right here. And there's others as well in the sky. Hercules cluster is pretty famous. Many folks know the Pleiades star cluster, which is really famous for the winter sky in Taurus the Bull. But I think this is placed among some of the greatest clusters seen from Earth. And this is called the double cluster. So you don't just get one cluster, you get two actually. You can kind of see it if you look carefully. You got one cluster here and another. These clusters are roughly about 7,500 light years away. The light you're seeing from this, it's taken about 7,500 years to travel to Earth. And as we zoom in, you'll see more of the stars. And so this is actually better to look at through binoculars, give you a nice wide field and allow you to take in the majesty of a star cluster, like the double cluster in Perseus. And this is a relatively young cluster at about 12.8 million years. I know it doesn't seem young, but for clusters, that's actually pretty young, and makes for a beautiful sight as seen from Earth near the head of Perseus. Some people will place that near the sword of Perseus as the jewel of the handle of his sword, but it just depends. But if you look in this area again, kind of near Perseus's Y shape, it's technically in the constellation, but kind of near those bright stars, and also near to Cassiopeia, you may find that cluster there, the double cluster. And for a nice celestial treat this year in 2020, on October 31st, which of course we all know is Halloween, we have a full moon, which is great, right? For many reasons, you know, werewolves and all kind of creepy things regarding the moon being large at this time of the year. And so that's really nice to have a nice big bright moon. And if you're trick-or-treating or going outside, I know this year might be a little different because of the pandemic, but if you're doing anything outside at night, having a large bright full moon, if it's clear, is really great to provide some extra light for folks doing nighttime activities. And not only is it a full moon, but it's something called a blue moon. And I know most of us know the term once in a blue moon when something doesn't happen very often. And you can kind of say that for a blue moon. And what that is not really when the moon is blue. The moon technically can turn blue if you have the right particulates in the atmosphere that can scatter red light and make the moon blue. And that's very, very rare. That's really a once in a blue moon kind of event. And that really almost never happens. It's a very rare thing. But what does happen a little more often, but not all the time, is 2 full moons in 1 month. And for most calendar years, normally you have 12 full moons because the moon takes about 29.5 days to go from one phase back to another. That's called the moon's synodic period, and that's the source of the month. Actually, the word month and moon are related words. They're called cognates. And the word month used to be like moonth, but an O has been lopped off for month, and that's where that comes from. So it's kind of neat to know where the common words that we use, especially for time, have celestial origins. So once in a while, depending on how things line up with the months, because of course not every month has the same amount of days, right? And since the synodic period of the moon is 29.5 days, sometimes it lines up where you'll have 2 full moons in 1 month. And that's what we call a blue moon. There's actually another definition of a blue moon, if this doesn't make it even more confusing, and that is it's the 3rd full moon in a season that has 4 full moons. Because normally each season, if you're talking about fall, spring, winter, summer, a proper season, normally has 3 full moons, right? Because if you have 4 seasons and 3 full moons for each season, that's 12 full moons a year. But if you have one season with 4 full moons, the way the calendar lines up, and that 3rd full moon in that particular season would also be called a blue moon. That doesn't happen that often as well. But the normal blue moon that we talk about is the 2nd full moon in 1 month. And that last time that occurred was in 2018. So it actually happens every 2 to 3 years. So it's not a super rare event, but it doesn't happen that often. So the term once in a blue moon still kind of works for that reason. But it is kind of interesting to learn about these coincidences because it helps you understand the cycle and the pattern of the moon as it goes through its phases, right? As the moon goes from new moon, 1st quarter, full moon, last quarter, and then new moon again. These patterns can create interesting coincidences with where the moon is and what phase it's in at a certain time of the year. And the origin of the term blue moon is not quite well understood. It comes from an article someone wrote back in the 1940s in an issue of Sky and Telescope, referring to 2 full moons in 1 month as a blue moon from the Farmer's Almanac. And so it kind of dates back to then and just sort of accepted these days. Now, one thing you may notice when the moon is full and when people are paying attention to it is that they're watching it more closely and watching it rise out of the east. And if I actually back up the time in here, I'll show you something interesting. It's something that you'll notice if you're looking very low in the horizon in the east once the moon rises. And something that people only think happens during these unique moon events, but it happens every time the moon rises above the east here once the sun sets. And so what you may find on Halloween, if maybe you're on the beach or something with a very clear view of the horizon, is that the moon may look kind of an orangish color, okay? It almost will have sort of kind of a pumpkin-y color to it, right? Very fitting for Halloween. And that color is actually always there when the moon is low, and it's from the thicker part of the atmosphere you're looking through, because you're looking through more of the curve of the atmosphere when the moon is low. And what happens is the atmosphere scatters away the kind of bluer, greener colors and allows the reds and oranges to pierce through and makes the moon more of a reddish, orangish color. But as the moon rises, it will then look more of that grayish white that you normally see it, because you're seeing it through less atmosphere. Another thing you may notice when the moon is low and rising out of the east is that it's going to look abnormally large, right? Kind of like in the movies when you see a large moon and it just looks absolutely huge. Well, the very large size or appearance of the moon to your eyes is actually an illusion, and your brain is playing tricks on you, making the moon look artificially bigger than it really is when it's low compared to when it's high up in the sky. And this is called the moon illusion. And a lot of people don't believe me when I say that, but if you want to prove it, look at the moon when it's low and looking very large, and put your hand or your thumb next to the moon and look how much the moon kind of takes its space, or takes up space on your hand. Then wait for the moon to get higher up and do the same thing. And you'll notice the moon covers, or your finger or hand covers, the same amount of the moon than it did when it was lower. And one idea, and there's many ideas behind this illusion, one idea is that your brain thinks that the sky is like a flattened bowl above your head, right? Not a perfect hemisphere, but like kind of like a cereal bowl above you, where the top is kind of squished downward a little bit. And so our brains sort of naturally think that. And if our brains think that, then the edges, the horizon, if you want to call it that, the horizon would be a little farther out to your brain. And if your brain thinks that the edges are farther away compared to the top of the sky, then when the moon is low, your brain automatically thinks, okay, it's farther away, but it looks the same size. And your brain compensates for that and makes the moon look artificially large. But then when the moon rises higher up in the sky, your brain thinks that it's closer to us, but it's still the same size. So again, your brain kind of makes up for that and makes the moon look smaller. And so there are differences between that, and that makes it quite interesting. But for Halloween, it's great to have a very large, bright moon, one that's a blue moon that doesn't happen very often, every 2 to 3 years, our second full moon for the month of October, and just a great moon to have at this time of the year. That's it for another edition of The Sky Tonight. Thanks again for tuning in. And come by our LOHMAN Planetarium, as we always say, for a live show if you feel up to it. We are doing shows safely every single day in the afternoons. And again, thanks for coming back to our Sky Tonight program digitally. And I hope you have a wonderful week of observing the sky. So happy stargazing and happy Halloween.